Morning everybody, welcome. This is the latest webinar from the East Midlands and it'll probably be the last for a short time. Well, we're back together again, all the East Midlands monitor farmers. That's probably about within a month, and the idea was that we squeeze this one in before everybody's busy again, but it's looking as though we've barely made it. I think some people are busy. It's drying up. I'm not complaining about that. Today then we're discussing challenges that farm businesses are facing and what lies ahead. What challenges they're facing on their own farms and what concerns them most in the coming years, and how they're dealing with the uncertainty and minimising the risk. For you listening, it's an opportunity to hear how the region's monitor farmers are preparing for the uncertain future and how they're prioritising. And you will have the opportunity to put your own questions to them. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. That leads nicely into the next bit, which is the housekeeping. Just to reassure you, you are all muted at the moment. We can't see or hear any of you. The webinar will be recorded. It'll be added to the AHDB YouTube channel. We're due to finish around 10 o'clock. Basis and Naroso points are available for this. If you want to collect them, can you make sure we have your details, please? Put them in the question box, which I'm going to show you in a minute. For questions for speakers, you can send those in all the way through. We might do some as we go along. We might leave some till the end. We'll see how that goes. If you look on the diagram, the picture, that should show you there's a box on the right-hand side of the screen where you can type your messages. And also, if you're having any technical issues, you can put a message in there, and Christian, who's behind the scenes, should be able to see that, and I hope he might be able to sort you out as well. On to our speakers then. I think you'll be familiar with them, all of them, especially if you were with us last time. But just to recap then, very briefly, this time we're going in geographical order from north to south. So we're starting at the top of the region. Colin Chappell is the monitor farmer for Brigg. Gary Willoughby is the monitor farmer for Wainfleet. James and Michael Parker, they're not actually together on the screen, but they are from the same farm. Father and son team from the Vale of Belvoir. And Rick Davies, Northampton Monitor Farmer. Well, we're going to start things off with a poll, which Colin is going to take you through. And at that point, I think I'm going to go and put my feet up and leave them to it. From that poll, we'll lead on to most of the rest of it. So over to you, Colin. Thank you.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons behind the whole meeting today, discussion today, was we personally, Chappell Farms, have just gone through the worst harvest since 1948, I think it was. I think that's what my granddad would say. And we constantly asked exactly that. Does your farm have more or less potential than this time last year? And I think this varies depending on where you are in the country. We in particular stand better than we did this time last year, but we would like to ask everybody around us whether they think they are better, worse, or about the same than they were last year. So we'll give them a bit of time, shall we, Christian, just to answer the question?
Yeah, we got about 50% voting for now, so I'll give it another 5-10 seconds or so.
And then as we're going through, we're going to discuss these exact points. And if this is the new norm, how on earth are we going to deal with this going forward, especially when our single farm payment, basic payment scheme is going to disappear? Look at that. Fantastic. So, but we are in the East Midlands, and I think the East Midlands is faring slightly better than, say, you know, Herefordshire or, you know, down south. So that's a positive start, and that gives us a positivity to go forward, I think. So next slide then, Christian. So this is us. We explained this last time. We're in the Ancombe Valley in northern Lincolnshire, mixture of owned, contract farmed, tenanted, and we do a bit of contracting from a neighbour. An increasingly large proportion of the farm is down to countryside stewardship, but we do farm on these high magnesium, 50 to 60% clay content soils. And when you get the wet winters like we've had, there is a lot of discussion around me in particular of how on earth do we farm this land if this is the new norm? My response at the moment is I have a suckler herd, I have a different income stream, and I have a diverse range of cropping, which means I can go into the spring cropping. And I think Gary in particular will go forward and explain how his probably spring cropping is more the new norm. The trouble with spring cropping is it's much more variable. Winter wheat on my farm is the bread and butter, is at the absolute, it's where I make the money. And we had less than 5% of the farm down to winter wheat last year. So if you go to the next slide, Christian, that picture there is this year. That is the River Ancombe. That is what makes or breaks me. And that is not as high as we've seen it, but it is amongst the highest we've seen it. But since 2000, it is increasingly like that. Those the banks of that river are not supposed to hold that water. They weren't designed to hold the water, and therefore they're leaky. If you look to the left and the right of that, you can see the increased puddling going around. And when it's held within its towpath, it's fine. But above that, it starts leaking and the infrastructure starts creaking. Rick will allude to this later, but I've mentioned weather. Weather's one of those things you can't do a lot about. We have to deal with day in, day out. That's what makes or breaks us as farmers. But the weather has an issue on my next point, which is the blackgrass. I believe, in my opinion, my blackgrass is getting easier to deal with, but only because I've structured the farm differently with the increase in spring cropping that the rest of us are seeing. But going forward from that, the loss of chemistry, in particular with some herbicides and in particular fungicides, we lost Bravo last year. How are you going to structure your business when you've got some of these very reliable, very cost-effective chemistry that is now gone? We have to rely on some of the more expensive. And if BPS, as we know, is going to disappear, how on earth is the ELMs going to ever replace the amount of money that BPS gave us? The only way on my farm I can see that being poignant is to make it part of my rotation. And maybe that's where I'll allude to later, is that is the way I maybe have to structure my business. So instead of having lots and lots of spring cropping, which doesn't favor my soils, maybe have a permanent crop, such as a lucerne clover mix, maybe grass mix going forward as part of my rotation. So for now, I will shut up. I've spoken long enough. Gary, do you want to allude to how you are this year, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Colin. Yeah, so my name's Gary here at Wainfleet Monitor Farm. Here we've got roughly 170 hectares of owned, rented on an FBT contract farming, plus other sort of bits and pieces whenever the phone rings. As Colin said, winter wheat is our sort of best paying crop. However, last 2 autumns now haven't gone according to plan. So we have had winter oilseed rape in the rotation, which has been good. We have got sort of flea beetle pressure and that sort of thing in the area, but we're doing okay with that at the minute. And then a good variety of other cropping as well. And I'm sort of quickly coming to being a bit of an opportunistic cropping sort of plan, really. When it seems wet to get your winter wheat in, you've got to quickly switch to a spring crop and really try not to sort of force things where they won't go, because it doesn't set you up well. Crop's got to go in well for me. So that's sort of bit of my rotation and talking about the weather extremes and that sort of thing. So a really mixed bag. And as Colin said, we've got some sort of pretty high mag clayey soils as well, which can be pretty tricky to work. And as you can see in the picture there, we've sort of ditched the plough and the heavy cultivations, going for a I don't know what the word is, whether it's direct drilling, min-tilling, regenerative agriculture. We're just sort of doing what feels best for us on the farm, what I can see working. There's no particular label on what we're doing. And on to the next slide, please, Christian. So challenges that I see, we've got sort of single farm payment, BPS going into ELMs. That is going to be challenging. We don't know the ins and outs of it yet. We know the direction of travel. We've got a bit of a guide. So we are on this farm sort of trying to go down a particular avenue with that and looking to embrace it. We've got to do. We're not just we're not going to fight it. We're going to embrace it and do all we can for it. Environmental responsibility and public perception, what we're doing on the farm, what other farmers can be doing. Just try and draw in the public. Really, they are our customers. We've got to fight for the pennies in their pocket, really, against others on the sort of world market. Succession planning is big on all farms, all sort of farming businesses, business structure, and that sort of thing. That's something we're sort of going through, and it's a bit of a murky picture and not overly easy. And then a bit that I've already touched on, the world market. How do we compete with many other countries in the world with different chemistries, environmental responsibilities, talking about carbon in the soil, sort of carbon calculators. We all know that they're out there. Is there any financial benefit to doing anything about it? That's an interesting one. Yeah, those are my few points. So thank you very much, and I will hand over to Michael. I think you're up next.
Morning, yeah, Michael Parker and my dad James Parker at Sherwood Farms. We are, if you don't know, is just over 600 hectares, of which 560 hectares are arable, 3 blocks 10 miles apart. A mixture of mainly clay-based soils, but we do have a sandy strip nearer to Nottingham. Our position last year, we didn't get about nearly 200 hectares of winter cropping drilled. This year we came up about 50 hectares short, which sounds better. However, some of that we're now looking at re-drilling. It's just sitting a bit wet. And of note, oilseed rape, 18-19, we had 137 hectares in the ground, but over that entire crop we lost £200 a hectare. And then 19-20, it says 54 hectares. We planted 110 hectares and every one of those failed, so we've dropped that from the rotation. So you'll notice there's a lot of different spring crops there, or a number of different spring crops anyway, that we're sort of dabbling in and seeing which ones we can and can't make money in, and we're not making money in them all, so it's still a learning game. And then if we go to the next slide, please, Christian. So the challenges that we see at the moment, we're renewing our countryside stewardship, which is obviously very apt with what some of the others are saying, with needing to find different sources of income perhaps, and how we can best use that to support our business with the drop in BPS. And then an ongoing one for us is our drill cultivation problems. That picture that you see on the top left is one that we took our Amazon Kena drill to pieces and mounted that to an old subsoiler frame. That's the tines off the Kena, which is a trailed with a tyre pack on the back that just doesn't run in the wet conditions that we've had for the last 2 years. So we've tried that. However, last year the crop planted with it won't have made any money, and this year we planted one field with it and it's nothing there. So still a work in progress with our drill, and whether we go direct drilling, I'm not sure. Most of the other guys on the chat today are on direct drilling in one form or another, or moving that way. And then our farm in particular has some nutrition problems with nutrition lockup. So we're looking at how best to extract what is in the soil already and better use what we have, because theoretically it should be possible, it's just how to get it. So yeah, looking at that. I think that's it. On to Rick.
Good morning all. Thanks Michael for that. Yeah, so sorry, next slide please. Question. So I'm Northampton Monitor Farmer, and I think this can be a good opportunity to chat around our different systems and different risks to our business. So as a quick summary, this is us. So we're just under 400 hectares, 140 hectares owned, 200 hectares roughly on one FBT, and 63 hectares on another. So we are largely tenant farmers. 2021 cropping, you can see we are very heavy on wheat. And as Colin said to earlier, wheat is the mainstay of our rotation. It's the money maker, and we've sort of, since we've moved away from rape in 2017 was our last year with rape. We used to be roughly 40% rape. Never achieved huge yields, probably 3.6 to 4 tonne if you're lucky. But since we dropped from rotation, we've sort of moved more into spring barley, which isn't on this slide as yet. But spring barley, spring beans, and more wheat. So we're growing more wheat predominantly because we're roguing blackgrass. We're getting the farm fairly clean, and it allows us to continue with the second, third, maybe fourth wheat if we think we can get away with it. We're using a lot of sewage sludge and making our own compost. Also, the spring barley is pretty big on our rotation. I dropped it this year because for fear of a no Brexit deal, and barley prices were on the floor as it was, and I just thought, you know what, I don't want to run the risk of growing a spring break and losing money. So we upped for some more wheat. Wheat price was good, but it will be back in the rotation next year. Next slide, please. So just on that previous slide, we do have about 13% of the farm down to mid-tier, whether it's arable reversion, SW7, which is back into grassland, or we've got a fair amount of wildflower mixes going in this year. On one FBT farm, we've got 22 hectares we're taking out of production, trying to straighten fields, take up awkward corners, awkward fields, trying to make ourselves a bit more efficient on the area that we have got. So our system is, we're strip tillage using a Claydon for the last 9 years, which I'm really pleased with. It's really coming to its fore in these wet seasons. Labour, which we'll allude to later, is just myself and my dad. He's 72. He thought he'd retired when he was 60. I came home and I think he's probably doing more now than ever. Hence, he's due for a wrist operation, a new hip, and he had a back last November. So I think he's getting towards the end of the road. We have this bit of casual labour in the summer. Have a lab come for 8 weeks, just primarily for harvest and a few light cultivations and hedge cutting. We chop 95% of all of our straw, and the other 5% we take off on the floodplain, which is for bedding for my cattle. With that bedding and cattle muck, we're making our own compost with some imported horse muck and wood chip. And as I said, sewage cake, that should be 130 hectares, not 30 hectares. So we're putting on between 4,000 and 5,000 tonnes a year of sewage cake, which comes from Thames water, which at the minute has been a real game changer in terms of money saving and fertility. Also in the business, we've got 14 office units, which we converted in the late 80s. Used to be our pig unit, and it's still, we still deem it as farming. It's just farming people, not farming pigs. I'm not sure they appreciate that analogy, but it's kept us going through some pretty tough years. We've also got a couple of old grain stores, which and another piggery, which we've got industrial units. And then 9 years ago, when I came home, I set up containerised storage business, and I'm also boxing beef with my grass-fed cattle. So as you can see, we're fairly diversified as well. We've got a fair amount going on, but at the same time, I feel that is fairly crucial to keeping the business afloat in some tough years. Next slide, please. So I've just put here challenges affecting the business. Obviously, on the left, we've got the ones we're in control of. Labour, I am in control, but I have maybe neglected to address this fully until the last couple of months, where I've been looking for a full-time man. I then broke my leg 3 weeks ago, which has really made it even more apparent how exposed we are to labour. Luckily, I managed to keep going. I haven't really done a huge amount until this week. I managed to prop myself up on the tractor and got a beer crate to keep my leg up. So it's meant we can keep moving. However, it's less than ideal. And it could have been a worse time of year potentially, but it just goes to show how exposed we can be. So I think that's something going forward I need to address. Fixed costs, as we know, we all sometimes have it's very easy to get lured into buying a bit of kit that you either don't fully need or is more expensive than you budgeted. And I found that last year we bought a new tractor and changed the sprayer and pretty much doubled my depreciation overnight. And as much as I needed to make that change, it really highlights when you see the accounts the following year how that affects your bottom line. Cropping, we're in control of cropping. Like I said, I know I'm very top heavy on wheat at the minute, but I think going forward we will be more 60-40 winter cropping to spring cropping. Variable costs is something I really want to try and tackle over the next couple of years. We're always trying to trim as best we can, but it's very difficult trying to cut nitrogen rates back when yield is effectively king. Weather extremes, I know a lot of folks say they can't handle, or we can't change the weather, but we can change our cropping accordingly. We're quite light on probably 40% of our farm, and I'm trying to build organic matter, build fertility to try and reduce those droughty years. Had we been under the plough, I'm pretty damn certain we would have had maybe another 1.5 to 2 tonne hectare less last year. Some fields where I over-cultivated 2019 and 2020, we had significantly reduced yield on where I'd been direct drilling. And it's really starting to become apparent in these dry summers how the system's starting to come into its own. As Gary said, public support, I really feel, as much as it can be frustrating dealing with public, and most of the public we probably see is on footpaths and bridle paths, we've got to keep them on our side because they are ultimately our consumer, and they do pay the bills in terms of BPS and ELMs. So I think that's always a difficult one, and we never have the best stance in terms of public opinion. But carbon footprint, as everyone's alluded to previously, I think that's going to be a bit of a game changer for us. I think the government's going to come down pretty hard on us going forward in terms of fertiliser application and emissions. Succession planning, that is fairly high on our agenda, and we are virtually completed. It's taken 12 years of family meetings to actually get to making any decisions, which is finally this year. And then diversification, as I said, we're fairly diverse, but I think going forward we'd like to keep pushing that side of the business as well. And then challenges affecting that we can't, that is out of our hands effectively, is, as everyone else has said, cap reform, BPS ELMs, foreign policy, the weather, exports, imports, and exchange rate, which I think that's all had a pretty significant effect on the wheat price in the last 12 to 16 months. For the positive, and hopefully it's here to stay for another 18 months at the least. But I just think it's quite good to break down exactly what you're in control of and what you're not, because it's very easy to get hung up on the things that we can't do anything about. Fundamentally, as far as I'm concerned, BPS it's pretty much gone in 7 years' time, and just got to try and find either other income streams or significant savings to try and recoup that money. It's not as straightforward as that, but anyway, that's me. Thank you very much.
Rick, before you just pause completely, we had a question about your compost making. Somebody's interested to know a bit more about how you create it. I know you talked about it a bit, how you make it and utilize it, how you manage that.
So, like I said, I make it primarily from March through to end of August. So my cattle are bedded on in a corral, outside corral on barley straw. And then where the ring feeders are, I feed them on top of wood chip. So they sort of wood chip and the straw soak up the urine and muck through the year, and then muck it out, mix it fairly roughly with the imported horse muck we've got. And also I've got some extra wood chip which I put on fairly thinly because I'm a little bit nervous about nitrogen lockup with the wood chip. And then I've got a windrow turner which I bought for £2,000 3 years ago. It's been out the back of a composting site in Peterborough, and I'll windrow it and then turn it 4 to 5 times if I get time. And then I'll try and apply that, get it tested and apply it to generally our lighter areas of our block. I'm on, what am I now? I did 20 hectares the first year, 18 hectares last year, and just slowly rotating it around the farm.
Thank you. I think at that point, yeah, there are some more questions coming in, but well, if we could move on to the next slide, please, Christian. We've got a summary of all the points that our speakers have touched on. And at that point, I'm going to hand back to Colin to lead into the next part. Thank you.
So guys, based on that discussion, that synopsis we've just given of our own businesses, and a very brief comment from James earlier where I asked him pointedly which was the worst harvest you've ever had, because for my farm it was last year. That is a variable that's the weather that we have no control over. But going forward in the next 7 years, we are about to lose, on my farm in particular, 45% of my income that I don't believe will be replaced by countryside stewardship. So are you individually going to embrace ELMs and countryside stewardship, or are you genuinely looking to diversify or structurally change your business in such a way that Rick alluded to of diversified income? Which do you see is more important, to diversify and structure your business differently, or to embrace countryside stewardship and ELMs and maybe make that part of your rotation? Does anybody want to start with that? I'm looking who would answer that first. Maybe Rick's smiling, so let's start with Rick. Would you prefer to do a diversified income, or try and keep your business going with, in my case, 45% less of your income? Which way were you steering your business at the moment, Rick?
Well, I think with a fair amount of diversified income already, we're trying to push. I'm pushing containers forward. I'd like to put more industrial units up, but at the same time, I don't want to subsidise the farm with diversified income. That has to stand alone, in my opinion, because if it doesn't, all I'm doing is hiding the problem. So, in my opinion, the diversified income has to stand up on its own 2 feet, as does the farm. So. As I see the diversified income, it's a route to maybe smoothing out cash flow and aiding, say, like a difficult year like we just had. But I really want to push on with ELMs in whatever form it is. Mid-tier, we've currently got 2 mid-tier schemes running at the minute, and like I said, we've taken out 13% of our land out of arable production in the last 4 years. So I think every time I apply for a new mid-tier scheme, I'm a lot more ruthless than I was the previous time, and I'm seeing the benefit of certainly the wildflower mixes. I'm seeing the wildlife, the insects, the bees. 10 years ago, if you'd said I was going to put almost 60 acres down to wildflower mixes, that would probably hit you. But I think we've got, like Gary said, we've got an environmental responsibility, and I think the more I've tried to push certain fields to 10 ton, they won't do it. They'll do 7-8 ton, and as we all know, 7-8 tons not enough. So I think we need to start looking at parts of the farm which won't return a decent income, and push them into guaranteed options. Some of these flour mixes are worth £500–600 a hectare. Yes, there's still some work to do there, but it's a guaranteed income, whether the sun comes out or the rain comes or it doesn't. And I think we've got to take these.
So going on to Gary, because you're a bit like me, to diversify my farm in the position I am, where I am, most people have done the diversifications. So I guess maybe in your case, you're embracing the environmental. How do you, as opposed to diversifying your business?
Yeah, I mean, I love being here on the farm and farming, and I sort of see, as Rick has said, the farmer's got to pay for itself. You can't subsidise it with sort of bringing other incomes in just to sit here on a farm. It's got to pay for itself. We have got a bit of countryside stewardship. In hindsight, I should have gone for it a bit more. We've took out a few sort of wet corners and bits and pieces. We've got a few margins and that sort of thing, but I could have done a lot more. And I'm just sort of sitting on the fence at the minute with the countryside stewardship, hoping that ELMs will soon become an option, and we'll really embrace that and really go for it with the ELMs. So looking forward to that coming. And yeah, reducing our fixed costs, our establishment costs, depreciation. With sort of going through the monitor farm process, the depreciation has really hit home when you see the figures in front of us, and it's a bit tricky really, because we only have one tractor on the farm. We've sort of one tractor, one self-propelled sprayer, one combine, one sort of JCB load all. So when you replace an old machine with a new machine, all of a sudden your depreciation jumps up. It's not as if we're replacing sort of one tractor every year and you've got a bit more of a rolling average. So that's been interesting to see. So we've got to really watch that. And then it's not something we've looked at, but maybe we should be looking at other income streams, whether that's some old buildings that could be put to better use. That's maybe something we should embrace a little bit more. But yeah, certainly it's at the forefront of our mind that we've with the BPS sort of going forward to the ELMs, we are in for a big shock. And I can see it coming, that we're going to really notice those sort of BPS checks diminishing, and it's at the same time that the wheat price is not going to be over £150 a tonne. Oil price is probably going to go up at the same time. I think we're in for some hard times going forward, and it's bound to all come together, isn't it?
So we're very lucky in that we now have James and Michael with a generational take on it. I would love to hear what James's opinion is of the year we've just been through. You seem to have quite a well-structured farm, potential diversifications. James in particular, how has the last year been for you, and how are you going to structure this going forward, please?
Yeah, this last year has probably been our worst year. I said before we started meeting, I started full-time in '76, which was the drought year. We finished combining on July the 31st that year. There's just nothing there. The combines go all day and all night. Wasn't much yield then, but the price went up, and then it was a very wet autumn, I think. But this year's definitely been more challenging. It seemed to be difficult all the way through. It was wet, and we just kept hoping all through the winter to get little bits in. Did some wheat late on with that time drill. It covered the ground, but it barely paid its way. It's not farming, is it? This season, we're a little better off. We've got quite a bit in on the light land. We've got heavy land. We've got some wheat in. One wheat field drilled on the last day of December. There's very little of that up yet. It looks like that's going to end up in spring barley. Another couple of fields we're trying to put spring beans in at the moment. Again, we didn't get the wheat in we wanted. How we're going to go on, I don't know. Our stewardship's due for renewal this year, or mid-tier scheme. We're wondering where we're going with that. At the moment, we've just got corners out in a few fields, just where it's all good and funny. But with the wheat price up and what money we get back from mid-tier hasn't gone up really, does make the economics of putting more mid-tier land very doubtful. We are lucky we can get, in a good year, if we can keep on blackgrass and we can get it in, we can make good money on wheat. I'm quite reluctant to put more mid-tier in, or where we go on that, I don't know. So we're looking at the moment. We're lucky, I diversified quite a lot in the past. We do taking green waste and compost it. A lot of rules and regulations on that. I'm past 100 registered. We're registered with the Environment Agency, and the County Council monitors all the time. So there's a lot of paperwork and regulations on that, but it is a nice income stream. Again, I think you've got to keep that separate from the farm. It's a nice income stream, but the farm's got to pay on its own, the arable. I've also put in solar panels. Again, keep that separate really, isn't it? The farm's got to make its money on its own. So we are really reliant on the weather and the price of wheat, isn't it, which is world market. Yeah. Neither of which we've got much control on. I think the only way to go forward is keep our costs down. We're doing less over the years. When I started, we had half the acreage and we had, I think, 7 men. We've now got 2 or 3, 2 of us mainly doing the arable now, 3 at times. And we've got more than double the acreage. We're doing less and less as years goes on. You know, traditionally you ploughed and then bashed it down, you dished it twice, you power-harrowed it twice, rolled it, then drilled it and rolled again. Nowadays, we're trying to get right through to the direct driller if we can, and to just drill it and shut the gate, spray it. I think it's keeping costs down is the way we've got to go.
And having just done benchmarking, Rick alluded to this, I bought a sprayer last year, and then you're all right when everything's going well, but as soon as you get a dodgy year and your depreciation costs go sky high, and then you get benchmarking and you get some of your peers then sat on an arable business group going, Colin, those figures look disgusting, and you're thinking, yeah, how can I justify them to myself, let alone to everybody else? So Michael, just without starting a family rift here, how do you see the business going forward? Do you believe, you all sound like you've got scope for a bit of room to move on elms. How do you see, Michael, your business?
Yeah, it's very much the same as the others. We definitely do have bits that could come out and make our current fields more productive, and cutting costs, as Dad says, is where we've got to go. But it's interesting, the depreciation. Like you, we bought a sprayer last year and we bought a trail, so we bought a tractor to go with it. So that's an extra huge chunk. I don't know what it is. It's probably 1/3 of our costs are now tied up in this new sprayer. But if we can balance it over 10 years, whether we can quite reach 10 years, depreciation sometimes looks a bit high because you lump it all, or you do it on a sliding scale down. But if you actually average it over the 10 years, perhaps it is a bit fairer.
Over its full lifespan, as opposed to the accountant wanting to depreciate it 30% for a start.
Well, exactly, yeah. But if you do it fairly, just for yourself on a separate sheet, if you like, then it helps. But yes, the machinery. We bought a Fendt 724 in 2018. That was just over £100,000. We bought a Fendt 724 this year. It was £160,000. That's a hell of a jump in however long it is, 4 years. So costs are going up, but then equally we're being more lean. Like the 724 we just bought replaced a 300 horsepower 930. So we're cutting costs, and I'm sure 930 again would have been, I don't know how much more, another 50 grand or so, but if we can just keep streamlining as we are and just keep it back, but it's making sure that we can do as good a job with that streamlining and not sacrifice it, which is where the issues come.
So two of you, Gary and Rick in particular, mentioned public perception. Is ELMs and environmental responsibilities and structuring the farm, we all sound like we've got a bit of room to manoeuvre. Is that something we should be, yeah, I'm playing devil's advocate here, obviously, is something we should be paying attention to? I know several farmers around me that feel quite belittled by the fact that they are being belittled by the public. How do you view public perception? Is maybe ELMs the way to go going forward to increase the public perception? Should we start again with Rick, because that's where we started before? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think at the minute ELMs has been, I know Gove really pushed it back into the public forum 3 years ago when he started talking about cap reform, and I think he's opened it up to the public, saying public money for public good, and obviously that hit the headlines, and people are saying, well, this is our money. We want to see the best benefit, or the public wants to see the benefit to them, if you like. So I think he's already lined it up as such that we are effectively trying to give this public good to the general population. So I feel like at the minute ELMs and cap reform is set up in light of that. But I think you're right. I think that you look at country file these days, it's all about the birds and the bees, wildlife, etc. And I think never has there been so many farming programs on TV, and it's really good for the industry. But I do think they flirt around the edges, and they do go and look at all the fluffy lambs and stuff. And you rarely see them on the fen looking at big kit, maybe because that gives the wrong perception of agriculture. But I think we need to get the public on our side, and I think probably the best way to do that is to show that we are putting something back. We are trying to reduce inputs. We are trying to encourage wildlife and ground nesting birds, etc. So I think it is our responsibility to do that, but it's just how we do that and how we try and do it together. That's the difficult bit.
So one potential way, and maybe to Gary now, one potential way to do that to public perception is to invite people onto our farm, maybe trying to target the younger generation, maybe the school kids, the primary school. Would that be something you guys would be interested in, or would that scare you, health and safety issues and that sort of thing? Gary, do you have a public perception and children maybe being invited onto your farm?
Yeah, you're right there, Colin. It is scary, I think, bringing the public onto farm. Farms are notoriously dangerous places, unfortunately. But I think as part of the ELMs, the public have got to be embraced here on farm. I'm pretty sure that within the scope of ELMs, there will be sort of room for carbon capture and that sort of thing, which isn't so easily to see. But I think I can see sort of going forward much larger areas being put down to wild bird, wild flower, pollinator mixes, probably with a little, I don't know, bit of gravel in the corner of the field near a gateway to park your car. People able to sort of get out, go for a little walk, maybe even a bird hide there for people to sit in. It may be that we have more sort of open days on the farm for people to come and kick combine and tractor tires, see what's going on, maybe see some fluffy lambs and some calves and that sort of thing. I think we're going to have to sort of bring them in to see that sort of thing. And I hope that at the same time we will be able to sell them a box of beef or a leg of lamb to take home with them. They may pay for a cup of tea or a coffee or a burger while they're here if we're having a bit of an open day. I can see that coming. It's not something I do at the minute. It's I quite like my own little world here on the farm, but it's probably something we've got to embrace, albeit in a sort of controlled manner. I'm not going to have a car park right next to the house. It will be sort of away somewhere where there's a nice sort of quiet corner that they can go. Hopefully they'll realise that there is a litter bin there as well to sort of clean up after themselves. But I can certainly see going forward that 1, 2, 3 times a year we'll sort of have an open day here on the farm, and Joe Public will sort of come and have a look, see what we're doing, and try and embrace it. It's going to be a sharp learning curve on that front, but I think we've got to bring people in. We've got to bring people in, and on the back of that, sell them the idea of what we do for the environment, the food standards that we are working to, and try and improve our public perception, and to all age groups, not just children, but to everybody.
Yeah. So James, Michael, exactly the same question to you. It's a way of educating people, full stop, to what we're doing. And if potentially, and I do mean potentially, because there's people probably listening into this, that you might be able to get some money to bring people onto your farm and get paid for visits of any sort, but you can then explain to them what the margins around the field are for, etc., etc. Would that be something to embrace, or is that something that would scare the living, bejesus out of you, to be honest?
There's an interesting point that I think Gary sort of alluded to, but perhaps not, in that the perception that perhaps we're talking about trying to create is one about how good all the different things are that we can do. However, if we're talking about bringing school children onto the farm, it's quite interesting that I live with a teacher and they know nothing about how we produce our eggs on our farm. We've got layers. And if we can show that at an early stage and show actually how it's done, and then when things come out that all chickens are in cages or cattle are kept inside, or whichever industry it is, it might just help to elude it. And if we can present why we're doing that in a clear way, and present why we're doing that is actually better for the livestock for whatever reasons, or it might help a little more than just showing the best bits. Like if I show someone, oh, we've got some sunflowers in these winter bird food mixes that we've had that look brilliant and people love, then it helps, obviously. But I think if we can show them the reality of what we do and why we do it, because there's good reasons behind everything, could be beneficial.
What's your devil's advocate, James? What do you think to inviting people onto the farm?
We've always avoided it.
Yeah.
Traditionally, we've had hens in cages. Obviously, a very bad perception on that by the general public, and there seems to be everyone wants free range now, isn't it?
Yeah.
As it needs to be considerably better for the hen. Now we've got both. I personally prefer the colony eggs because there's never antibiotics ever fed to them. It's just straight food. They're healthy hens. There's less mortality, and they seem happier to me. But it's perception. But whether you can get that over the public, I somehow doubt, because everyone comes in with a fixed view to start with.
Yeah.
So that's why I've avoided really having people on the farm. And really got bitten years ago when Edwina Curry was on about salmonella and eggs. My father did an interview for one of the medias, and they totally twisted it and cut it and edited it to make us seem so anti everything. It puts you off, isn't it? At the same time, we used to write to all the papers, and asked the Times why he never published any of his letters. They said, "Oh, it's not what the public wants to read." That was the Times. They wanted Lacey and the extreme views, because people read that, they like the extreme views. The moderate views, the Times won't publish it, or the television.
It doesn't sell papers. So
it doesn't sell papers.
Can I just butt in, Colin, for you?
Yeah.
I think Michael touched on obviously wildflowers, etc. This year, the first time I've grown sunflowers in our AB8, I think it is. We had about 6 hectares at home, and the amount of people, which unfortunately is not near a footpath, but people ended up trespassing to that block of sunflowers. But the interest, the photographers that rang me up, can I come and take some photos? I had a small young band who wanted to come and make it their front cover for their album. They paid me 300 quid. But it was the interest that it generated just from having some sunflowers, and it was I think we need to use those kind of stories to start the conversations. And I think it might not seem like a lot, but maybe use that as an opportunity to get people on farm. I'm with Gary. We don't really open ourselves up to a huge amount. I mean, my box beef, I get some good conversations on people's doorsteps, and that's all very well. But I often shy away from a lot of the general details.
And I think James just hit it on the head, exactly that. We would want to open ourselves up and show people the good bits, but there are parts of our farm that maybe would cause furore, and there might be people that target that in particular to going forward. So it has to be managed quite carefully, shall we say.
Yeah.
I've got a feeling Judith's going to want to butt in a minute, but I would love just to, in the last few minutes, it's Carbon Footprint Week on AHDB. And therefore, have you guys, so interestingly enough, I think you're about to, but have you done a carbon footprint? What does it make you think about your business? Is there any way in particular you can lower your carbon footprint? Should we start again with Rick going forward? Have you done it yet? Have you thought about it? Do you know where you're going to target?
I've thought about it, yes, and it was something on my radar. Probably not now, broken my leg, but it'll be this.
Good time.
Yeah, it was just everything takes a little bit longer now. Certainly trying to do some work, but I think probably this winter I'd certainly like to sit down and look at it. And it's something we need to do as a business. We need to know exactly where we are, so we've got a starting point. It's like organic matter testing. I did that probably 5 years later than I should have done. I started in 2015, not 2012 or 2011 when I came home. And sorry, my wife's wandering around. I've lost my thoughts.
It's all right. Shall I move to Gary? Because the question I've got for Gary in particular is 50% of our footprint is down to the fertilizer we turn. For a ton of wheat, for example, 50% of it is nitrogen. You actually mentioned nitrogen use efficiency. It's something I'm looking at in particular. How do we use it better? How do we use it more efficiently? Have you done your carbon footprint? Have you looked into it yet, Gary?
I haven't got an exact figure on it yet. No. Yes, I have looked into it. Yes, a bit like Rick, it's definitely on the agenda. It's something we've got to get a handle on. We have been, for the first time, sort of looking at our organic matters on our soils. It's something that we will certainly be looking to improve on a year-on-year basis. Fertilizer always comes out as the most troublesome sort of figure when talking about carbon and carbon use on farm. So we will be looking to improve nitrogen use efficiency. Also, I mean, we're not using a lot of sort of P and K on the farm. We've got a good rotation of manure going back on. So really trying to use the nutrients that we've got on the farm to the best of their ability. And yeah, at the minute it's reducing diesel, sort of going down a bit of a direct drilling no-till type of route. Placement of fertilizer around the seed. If we can sort of cut our fertilizer use by 10% here, by 15% there, then it's all going in the right direction. It naturally helps going to a sort of spring cropping, a few more pulses and sort of legumes in the crop, in the rotation rather, is all helping. So yeah, the less fuel, the less fertilizer we're using on the farm, then it's all well and good. And if we can improve our organic matters while doing that, then that's a pretty clear direction of travel. And hopefully it'll tie into ELMs as well. Knowing our sort of carbon footprints.
I see Judith's come back, so very quickly to Michael and James, maybe carbon sequestration. If we can increase the amount of organic matter in our soils, we can decrease our carbon footprint quite substantially. Have you looked into it? Are you about to look into it? Is it something we need to? Michael, do you want to?
The only real looking into it that I think Dad's looked into it slightly more, but there's sort of offers floating about of 10-year schemes to tie your land up in to do it, and that's a long-term commitment that is obviously scary for the time being. Whether it's hard to know until we get clear guidance. I don't think that there is a particular answer, and we're quite fortunate in that our soils are very high organic matter because of all the manures and compost that we put on. So quite whether we're going to benefit as much as some people who perhaps haven't looked after their soils as well as we have is another matter, but it's certainly an interesting point that we can perhaps take advantage of. It's just no idea how yet.
So should we ask James the same question? Have you had a look into it, your carbon footprint, James?
We started because there are schemes around being made aware of where you can get up to €90 per hectare, which is a lot of money if you dedicate your land to carbon question. How you do that, I've not fully looked in. I think it's quite strict on what you can and cannot do on your land. I don't think you can subsoil. You certainly can't move your land. But we are going down that way, aren't we? We're going direct drilling.
And,
exactly.
it might be our new income stream. It might be something to do with carbon, and we all have a vast amount of carbon built up in our soils, and it might be our new income stream going forward. It's something that gives me a more positive outlook on my business going forward, that it all seems bleak and doom and gloom, but in actual fact, we have this big store there that we can utilize going forward. So Judith, do you want to come in, because obviously we're running short on time now? So
thank you. Yes, yeah, I was keeping my eye on the clock. I didn't want to cut you off, but I'm just aware I think we'll overrun a bit. Apologies, but don't forget we are recording it, so you'll be able to catch it afterwards. We do have some questions. I just want to remind people as well, if you need to claim NOSO and basis points, whatever, put the information for those please in the question box, and we'll deal with that as well. I think I was going to invite more questions, but it's probably not such a good idea at now, because I don't think we'll really have time for them. Being realistic, we'll be overrunning by hours if we're not careful, but I'm going to have to be a bit selective, I'm afraid. Anyway, this one, you've actually touched on it a bit. What are the major investments the panel are planning in the next few years to improve farm resilience? Shall we start with you, Colin, on that one?
Yes, basically the answer is nothing. I am keeping my hands firmly in my pockets. I'm not going to invest in anything in particular. The one thing I want to do is the drainage on the farm. We've been doing it continuously for several years, but there's just hopeful there might be grants going forward to do our drainage, and therefore I don't want to just sort of go too early and spend somebody. I've done my grain storage, you've seen the silos, long-term structures all in place. I want to stop spending now until I know the details going forward.
Gary?
A little bit like Colin, I'm being very cautious at the minute investing. I'm looking to sort of get a few sort of small debts on sort of machinery, sort of tractor and combine sort of paid off, which will tie in nicely with the end of the sort of BPS that we know is happening, and then sort of try and set myself up, be in a strong position for new opportunities that will come along. So yeah, on the sort of back burner is possibly sort of solar panels and that sort of thing going forward, which may be something we look into. But yeah, I'm just watching my fixed costs, just bracing myself for change. And it may be that yeah, we take 20-30% of the farm out of production for countryside stewardship. So yeah, being very cautious at the moment, and just sort of yeah, waiting and seeing. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the ELMs coming through. I think it'll be good opportunities for us.
I don't know whether to ask Mike or James. We might get different answers. Shall we start? Shall we say James to start with?
Again, the drainage does need attention in one or two fields. I'd rather spend the money there where you can get the money back, isn't it, over a 5 or 10 year period. Mike would love to have a disc direct drill, but they're not cheap. You're over £100,000. It's a long while to get your money back. I'm hoping they're going to bring in the grants again, one form or another, to have to purchase a direct drill. But as you say, I think it'd be frugal really, and spend as little as you can.
Anything to add, Mike?
As Dad said, I'd love a new drill, but we're just stuck in like an awkward phase where we can't agree or decide on what drill we like, and as Dad says, it's 100 grand. We had the grant this year and we didn't spend it because our cash flow from last year wasn't brilliant, and we're not 100% sure on quite where to go. And there's the risk of perhaps if we lose Roundup, is our direct drill that then can't cultivate for itself in front of it actually any use, or is it going to need changing again? That's another sort of back of mind thought that troubles you. So
okay. And Rick?
I'm sort of maybe between everyone here. I'm basically trying to make the most of BPS while we've still got it. We're in that position now where we've got, not had the best of years last year, but we're looking a little bit better this year in terms of wheat price. I'd like to try and take some of the money that we've got through BPS at the minute and reinvest it in the business, so that when we do get to the lean years in 2027 onwards, we're well equipped to go forward. And I've just had 100 acres scanned for drainage, like Colin said. It's been on the radar for quite some time, and I thought, you know what, we really need to address this. Some of our best cropping land in a normal year, it'll do 11-12 ton. In a wet year, it'll do 6, and I can't afford that variability. In terms of our system, I'm really pleased with the way the system's set up. I just want to try and tweak that. The Clayton's working really well for me. There's just a few changes on that I'd like to make, but largely much the same. I mean, again, reducing inputs. Ultimately, I want to get to the point where my wheat, I can inter-row hoe it and then rogue it, and that's it. So I'd like to get to a point where I'm reduce my herbicides by probably 80%. Whether that's achievable or not, I don't know, but that's where I want to get to.
And I don't know whether we have got the ear of anybody important listening in on our conversation, but drainage is absolutely key to soil health, in my opinion. Yeah. If you haven't got the drainage right, there's no way you can address your soil health issues, in my opinion, and therefore that does need some focus from government, in my opinion. But
yeah, I think that's missing in the
really are going to be fairly speedy with this one. It's a fairly big question, but it'll have to be a fairly swift answer. We're going to get thrown out of here, I'm afraid, by 10 past at the latest. So swiftly, you all think that you'll need to hold open days for the public. So do you think you should lobby the NFU to develop blueprints for open days, a bit like Leaf's Open Farm Sunday? And do you think you should lobby to get funding via ELMs for this sort of PR exercise? Fairly swiftly, please. We'll go in the same order, please. Colin.
Yes, I think there is. What would really help is to have somebody holding your hand to do it. I don't think, in my opinion, you could do it on your own. I think you do need to hold your hand, and if you can sponsor somebody or get funding to have somebody help you through the difficult questions that might come from a public being invited into the farm, that's where I would urge the money to go.
Gary?
Yeah, I'd be open to the idea, and it's not something I've ever done before. So if there's anybody could hold my hand along a path sort of down that avenue, then I'm all up for it. Yeah, I'd be up for any help that was available. But I can see it being part of sort of ELMs and the future of farming, really. Yeah.
Mike?
Funding wise, I think it's going to have to be self-sustaining, and I think that thinking about if you need funding, I think of it more as an advantage to get people on farm, and then we could sell them RX or something else. I think there's certainly an opportunity there. It's just how to do it. As you say, a bit of guidance would be nice.
James, I think I'll go straight to Rick in the interest of time. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, and I think like Colin's already said, I mean, Open Farm Sunday has been really successful. The amount of people that's managed to get on farm over the last 10 years. We did it in 2014, really pleased with it, but subsequently since then, getting married, having children, everything else, it seemed to have got a little bit put to the back of the list. But I really enjoyed the experience, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there to do that. But again, it needs to have a framework, and whether that's through Leaf, I mean, Leaf have already got it set up and sorted, whether that's something that the NFU do in conjunction with Leaf. But I think there's definitely on the right track anyway with Open Farm Sunday.
Thank you. Well, I think I'm sorry to those of you who sent questions and we haven't time for them. I mean, some of them are really interesting, but they're actually discussion points, and we really would need a lot longer. I mean, right, like an hour or two longer. So I have to leave it at that for questions and discussion. Just a few final points then before I do the actual closing. I wish to thank everybody for your contributions to all of our speakers, our panel, Colin, Gary, James, Mike and Rick. Thank you very much for that, and Colin for kindly volunteering to lead the discussion. You did so competently. And Colin, I'm sure you said a few minutes ago that in the Arable Business Group meeting, somebody said that people said that your figures look disgusting. I don't remember that. You were probably thinking that. Anyway,
it was a text you didn't see.
Right. Okay. Thanks to Christian for keeping things going in the background as well. So yeah, we are at the closing bit then. You'll be taken to a feedback form at the end when it all finishes. Can you provide us with feedback, please, on this and any webinars you think that we ought to be doing? That would be really useful for us. Just a reminder, it has been recorded, is being recorded, and it will be available for you afterwards. Just to my contact details, if you wish to follow anything up, then please do. Just the next webinar that we have with AHDB Cereals and Oilseeds is on Monday night on cover crops, intercropping and companion cropping. And so that just brings us right to the very end, and I want to just mention the Monitor Farm survey. You normally would do this in person, you could write it on paper and stuff like that. Everything this year has all been online, so it refers only to webinar type stuff, online meetings and so on. There is a prize for filling that in, a hamper worth £50, so obviously it'll be well worth it if you win that, I think. I think that's it then. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you those of you who sent questions in. Till the next webinar. Goodbye.